I saw you standing alone, without a calf of your own.
Hello there. Over time, I've appreciated the work of Richard Misrach, but I haven't delved into his evolution as a photographer to really grasp what the essence of his practice is. Simplistically, he's a landscape photographer who focuses on the environment, but there are layers of meaning to his work. Some of his projects explore the interface between the human presence and the environment, while others are purely homages to the beauty of nature. I'd like to show you as many of his projects as possible, but I'll begin with his desert series. It's divided into 8 sections. My commentary will eventually catch up with the photographs. During the 1970s, color photography technology had improved to a degree that allowed photographers to begin producing work that could be recognized as art photography. Misrach was very aware of the explorations by photographers like Stephen Shaw, William Eggleston, Joel Meyerowitz, and Joel Sternfeld. John Sikowski's essay that accompanied the William Eggleston Guide exhibition gave photographers like Misrach permission to pioneer a new domain of color photography. Misrach considered the new topographic photography of that time to be too cold, intellectual, and clinical. But for him, Joel Sternfeld's 8x10 work was perfectly pitched. There was irony and wit, but also beauty, attention to light, as well as social and cultural commentary. He described this early connection with Sternfeld's work as a eureka moment. It triggered a rethink on his whole approach to photography. On a technical level, he had been using a Hasselblad 2 1/4 square, but then shifted to an 8x10. During an interview, Misrach said that his career, in a way, had been about navigating 2 extremes, the political and the aesthetic. In terms of understanding his work, this statement is crucial and gives structure to his prolific output over the past 5 decades. His work holds the space between being aesthetically appealing and also communicating his concerns for the society and the environment. His subject matter at times could be suitable for reportage, but his images tend to appear more as historical records.
Photographs, when they're made, can shift meaning with time, and often do. There's lots of pictures I like right away, but I know that I'm going to change my mind. So I shoot them, I test them, I make small prints, then I make large prints, then I kind of put them away, sometimes for a year or 2 years. And then I can see them really fresh, like for the first time. So even though my subject matter is sometimes very much of the news, like the US border maybe, or a nuclear test site or a bombing range, something like that could be also fodder for journalism, legitimate fodder for journalism. I try to make what I would consider more like in relation to historical paintings, like history paintings, using photographs to make images so visual that 30, 40 years from now, people look back and it'll represent this historical moment. That's been something that's been very interesting to me, the shift in time in a photograph. So for example, I photographed the Oakland fire in California over 20 years ago now. When I made the photographs, I decided I didn't want to publish the work at that time, exhibit it, do a book of it. I thought I'd put it away for posterity. What I found is that 20 years after the Oakland fire, I did do a book, and I did an exhibition of the work. I blew up the pictures to 8x10 feet tall. And I found that the work's meaning had shifted over time. It goes from sort of journalism to history. And I've noticed that with my work with Katrina and other kinds of issues, that over time, photographs shift their meaning.
His early attempts to be a social activist resulted in a poorly received book of black and white pictures of the homeless. He was uncomfortable with the power imbalance between the photographer and the subject.
And when the book was done and the work came out, I felt uncomfortable. I felt like, I realized then, I was a ripe old age of 24 years old, and I realized then that I had a power over the people that I was photographing that they didn't realize. They were my subjects, and it was theoretically equal, but it really wasn't.
He moved on to photographing the deserts of Southern California, Nevada, and Arizona. He's probably best known for his desert cantos. The word cantos describes sections within a poem. These are the photographs that I've been showing you so far in this video. He doesn't see this work merely as landscape photography. Rather, the photographs are symbolic of the US as a whole. It's a metaphor for the country. Even within this umbrella theme of the desert, the photographs vary in their political messaging, but they maintain a striking beauty. He's offering the viewer a poetic exploration of a space within time and inviting us to contemplate our individual and shared relationship with the environment.
Once I started going out and photographing the desert, I discovered that it was a raw stage for looking at the state of the planet. Somehow everything, every cultural component of the world stood out in great relief in the desert. Now I'm photographing the US-Mexico border, where I'm photographing passages where people come through and die from trying to get into this country in the deserts of the US.
I'll take a look now at two other projects that emphasize the primary foundations that define his work: his environmental concerns and his pursuit of beauty. For his project Petrochemical America, he chose to photograph within a highly industrialized section along the Mississippi River known as Cancer Alley. In the early days, this was a fertile fishing ground for Native Americans. Later in the 1700s, the land was split into lots for French settler farmers. And then in the mid-20th century, the oil industry boom transformed the region. He photographed the bizarre juxtapositions of comfortable-looking homes overshadowed by giant industrial plants and pipelines cutting through swamps and fields. Misrach has returned again and again to a Honolulu hotel, and from a 7th or 8th floor balcony, he pointed his camera down onto a particular stretch of water and beach. This ongoing series illustrates how he engages with a subject in different ways over time. His initial series, called On the Beach, was made soon after the 9/11 attack. And it reflects how his way of viewing everything was altered by this dramatic event. He said that suddenly, simple activities like people floating on the salty water took on a new character and sparked recollections of the images that he had seen of people falling from the towers. So even his picture of a lone couple on a beach can be vaguely unsettling. Their isolation emphasizes their vulnerability, and they are also unaware of the photographer observing them from a distance. The title of the project also has an ominous origin. It's linked to Nevil Shute's novel with the same name about a post-nuclear world. Later on, he returned to the same hotel and back on the balcony, but this time his concerns about life had shifted, and therefore the way in which he saw the world had changed.
It's been very interesting to use the same spot, this place on the beach that I keep going back to and seeing the world differently. As I age, the work is kind of slowly shifting, and so the newer work is in dialogue with the older work. For me, it's been fascinating to watch kind of how they talk to each other. You know, there's obviously similarities, a lot of similarities, but then the differences become huge.
His attention was being drawn to thoughts of his own mortality. He was asking more existential, metaphysical questions about what it means to be alive, as well as considering the broader human response to nature. When he prints these images, sometimes over 3 meters in length, the viewer is able to engage with the scene as a whole, but then also getting closer to look at the subject. They become a form of portraiture, but they also allow one to engage with the character of the water that surrounds them.
You can't read them. You can't, beyond the surface of what they look like, what their body gestures are, and you can make out so much there, they still remain opaque. It's not just about the portrait of the person, it's the portrait of the person in relation to the larger sublime of the sea. So you have a small figure sort of floating in a vast sea, and there's a sense of vulnerability. It's both beautiful and a little threatening at the same time.
Misrach has also ventured beyond the idea of straight photography. He was commissioned to produce art for the Pittsburgh Psychiatric clinic, but COVID hit and he wasn't able to travel and produce new work. So he mined his archives and started rethinking his old images. It became an opportunity for him to examine his work by exploring the aesthetic possibilities of the negative image. As we've all experienced, most inpatient facilities are bleak and depressing with no art on the walls, or they're filled with generic pictures that have a lot in common with elevator music. But this psychiatric clinic was thinking differently. They wanted to use art as a means of uplifting patients.
One of the big challenges that we face in psychiatry in general, in medicine, and in really embracing psychiatry as part of medicine is this lack of care and respect for inpatient facilities. There's just a very direct opportunity to use art to say that we care. Beauty is important.
Misrach believes that beauty is an effective strategy to win viewers' attention. By taking care of the lighting, composition, and details within his photographs, he encourages us to engage with his subject matter. His aim is to communicate a message, and the longer that viewers engage, the more likely that they are to relate to his message. I hope that you enjoyed his work, and I'll see you next time.